Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Startup Central right here on ET Now with me, Sumita Kari. Today on the show, we will be focusing on Budget 2026 announcements. In fact, for the IT industry, the focus is on strengthening digital infrastructure, promoting AI and emerging technologies, and expanding global competitiveness. This means more support for startups, enhanced R&D incentives, and smoother access to funding, helping India's tech sector so that it can maintain its edge on the world stage. Now, the Budget 2026 is clearly understood national security as a top priority as well. The government is also giving the sector a major thrust with a higher allocation that's focused on capital expenditure. Modernization of the armed forces is also a part. Indigenous production has been given a push, and R&D under the Aatmanirbhar Bharat framework has, of course, been focused upon. In fact, if we talk specifically about the defense budget, and why am I talking about defense budget here on a startups show? This is because of the kind of interest that defense companies, defense startups and new age companies have gotten from VCs since past couple of months. So if we look at the defense budget, well, that's jumped 15% to a record over 7 lakh crores, with 5.53 lakh crores being earmarked just for the capital outlay. This is aimed at boosting domestic defense manufacturing, modernizing our armed forces, and encouraging innovation. Now, for startups and innovators in the defense technology, this could be a game changer. It could open up new opportunities for collaboration and for investments as well. Now, to help decode what it really means for the sector, we will decode what the budget means for the IT sector, but let's first put the spotlight on defense sector. In fact, Ankit Mehta, the co-founder and CEO of IdeaForge, is now joining us. Ankit, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. As I was speaking, the defense capital expenditure is up 2.19 lakh crores, and of course the overall capital outlay is up by 1% as well. What do these announcements really signal about the intent of the government when it comes to defense? What is your overall broad reading?
I think with respect to defense, particularly what happened last year, it is obvious that to boost the overall allocation to defense is very critical, and unless and until we adopt technology capability en masse in bulk, it's going to be a tough time looking at what is happening in the global environment as well as what we experienced on our borders when we got through the conflict we got into last year. So I think that and the reports that we saw right prior to the budget regarding allocation of a large number of a pretty large value for drones and systems related to that, I think it's a signal that warfare is changing, and beyond conventional capabilities, we will have to look at getting new capabilities into the hands of the war fighters, and they will have to ensure that our national safety is completely held to guard, and they can create the necessary deterrence against our adversaries. So I'm very glad to see that the defense budget itself is seeing that push, and my expectation is that a large part of it will go towards modernization and adoption of modern technology or the emerging technologies like drones and counter-drone systems.
Right. Ankit, I'll come to what this essentially means for companies, but let me address one more point. And I remember when we had this chat before the budget, you did speak about a push to AI, to indigenization. Now, experts suggest that the Indian military, it needs to build capacities in AI and emerging tech, drone as well, and it needs to invest in capacities. Have those expectations really been delivered or met, at least as far as the finance minister's speech is concerned?
Yeah, I think at a very broad level, we've seen a pretty larger allocation to defense. So that's something which is happening. AI has been prioritized. We are seeing that a large 20,000 crore budget allocation has come to RDI, where we are going to invest behind early development, research and development in general. We have seen initiatives of that nature. So how these budgets eventually get utilized is what will determine whether the actual change in the right direction is happening or not. But the framework or the groundwork at probably a summed up level looks like it is available and it is in place. And we hope that it can be accelerated towards deployment and capability creation.
Absolutely. Ankit, but let me also ask you, what do these numbers and, of course, the kind of announcements that have been made to modernize the military, to give a push to the defense sector, what does this mean for startups like yourselves, for companies like yourselves?
See, I think for a lot of us, we've been investing in long-term capability, right? Directionally, where is the imperative going with respect to technology? Is it going towards combat capabilities? Is it going towards capability for EW resilience? We have been observing what's happening in the global environment, and we have to build capabilities in India that can ensure that we are not just subject to any critical vulnerabilities insofar as supply chain, etc., is concerned, but also look at how do we ensure that we continue to maintain strategic autonomy for the country in these domains, right? So that's one part of what we always plan for, and more allocation in those directions, more RFIs that come for different types of unmanned systems keep guiding our direction with respect to what specifically we should be building and we should be doing. So all of that is an area where startups have to be glued into in terms of what is the demand for information that is coming from the forces, as well as what is it that the overall ecosystem is going to demand from us, right? Going forward, uh, it is going to be very critical that we have edge compute on many of these devices. We also have resilience, like I mentioned, in all of these devices. And of course, the supply chain has to be thought through so that we don't get into one, issues with respect to availability of subsystems, but second, also with respect to vulnerabilities that can be in them. So all of that preparation is a very critical vector that we have to keep in mind. And once hardware is delivered on the field, it has to be something that can be upgraded in the field so that whatever hardware was delivered is future proof to that extent. Now, whenever you look at capabilities that are only coming from outside, the possibility of that adaptation on the ground, that fast iteration on the ground reduces. Whereas if it is a developed capability in the country, then that capability can be evolved very fast because most of it is software dependent once the hardware has been delivered to a certain capability. So I believe that for all of us, I think the writing is on the wall that we have to create that ability to deliver on this expectation of building sovereign indigenous capability that can be iterated very fast in the field and can help protect our soldiers and our nation in general.
Absolutely, Ankit. But when we talk about industry specifically, are the numbers generous enough to lead reform, to lead to reform of India's defense sector, and for companies, most importantly, to do the heavy lifting in terms of defense?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, earlier the increments were there, but those increments were going towards more conventional platforms. Now that the momentum has shifted, the same increments, if they come in the new age platforms, the emerging technology areas that companies and young companies are going to work towards, then obviously it's a massive shift, right? From a few thousand crores of procurement, it may actually jump to 10,000 plus crores in many of these segments, which is a huge lift if that happens. And therefore, it's going to be pretty adequate, very attractive for people to go in and build capability and technology, in my opinion.
Right. Ankit, so let me ask you on that note, when you say that this is going to be attractive for companies to sort of build capability and, of course, boost their own capex, what are going to be Idea Forge's plans so far as your spending in the defense sector is concerned? What is it that you're going to be focused on this year?
Yeah, I think we have obviously last year consolidated the gains of having invested in EW resilience, having built platforms like the Zolt tactical platform. Those are areas that we have already invested in. We are reaping benefits of those investments. We have to take those investments to maturity, to production, to proper field deployment. But we also are looking at, as I discussed during one of my conversations earlier, we are looking at how can we leverage this base that we have created of a lot of deep indigenous capability on all the core areas, particularly on avionics, particularly on hardware that is capable of upgrades in the field just via software, as well as can be very resilient on ground. Once all of these capabilities are there, then how do we leverage it on a wider set of use cases around leveraging our drones, not just for ISR missions for defense, but also for logistics, also for doing activity around combat capability. So we are developing the right kind of partnerships as well as right kind of base exists in the company that can be leveraged across a wider portfolio of solutions now.
Okay. All right. So you will, of course, be focusing on leveraging your core areas and building partnerships. But coming back to the budget, Ankit, R&D has also seen a hike of 15%, which has been a critical aspect, whether it's related to not just defense, but also deep tech areas as well. Has India, with the kind of spends that have been allocated to R&D, has India internalized that preparedness cannot rest on imports alone? And has that been kept in mind? Because what we essentially see is when we talk about manufacturing in India, a focus on local supply chains, building local supply chains has been given to, let's say, the electronics segment. But have you been able to gauge that happen, or that will perhaps be a priority in terms of the announcements that have been made?
Yes, I think if you look at the robust direction in which procurement has taken, particularly government procurement, they have prioritized buying from local companies, right? One method in which they do it is, of course, look at what is coming in the form of indigenous content. But also the other way to look at it is that when we start investigating, when we start opening the hood of what is being received at a system level, then we start realizing that whether the internals of that system are also of the right origin or not. Some of them we can't do yet in India. We will have to continue to work with friendly countries to get those capabilities. But there are certain capabilities that can be built in India, and a lot of upcoming capability in fabrication, etc., is going to happen as well. So how do we make sure that progressively we are doing more in India, and particularly to begin with, at least at the fabless level, at the level of design, of core design of many subsystems, if we can make them in India, then it's just a matter of getting the right production capability for hardware. So I think overall, as a country, if we progressively look at prioritizing indigenization, we look at, for example, in defense, I expect that there should be a greater boost towards indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured, because that is very important. Once that happens, then the sovereign capability gets the kind of fillip that is required, and nobody else can sort of prevent us from doing our own thing. And I think that's going to be the most important vector in the current geopolitical environment, where it is very difficult to understand who's really a friend or a foe and whether they will flip today or tomorrow. And we depend on core capabilities for our own defense for certain geographies. It may become very difficult in a conflict scenario. So
Absolutely.
I believe that we need to invest a lot of capability in that direction. Some of the procurement systems enable that, but more push is required. For example, ideally, we would want that a certain percentage of defense or capital procurement in the government is actually reserved for IDD, giving people more benefit for doing more in the country, in the sense that more subsystems of a system are built in India, designed in India, then that should get more merit as well.
Absolutely. So indigenization is key, but besides indigenization, designing, giving a push to design aspect of defense, that is also key. But thank you very much for the moment, Ankit, for taking the time out and giving us your feedback on what the budget entails for companies, for startups, and of course, the overall defense sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sumita. Looking forward.